we have only 2 items left on the agenda, and I have a meeting at 2:30. I might be being very optimistic here. I think if we deal with item 13, then I want to come back to Councillor Fletcher's issue after that. So this is the quarterly health, safety and wellbeing report, and invite Ollie Sanandres to speak to the report, please.
Thank you, Councillor. It's my Phil. This is an update report, as you usually get on the health and safety performance of Council. However, this quarter's report, also outlines for you and gives you some information on the new safety management framework and strategy that was agreed by the ELT in October. And it is a substantial change in approach for Council. It is designed to ensure that Council continues to improve its own performance and influencing that of its partners and the rest of the Council family following the major legislative changes introduced by the Health and Safety at Work Act last year. The introduction of the new Act was really intended to deliver a step change in New Zealand health and safety performance as a country. It demands from us to have the highest regard of employee safety. However, the Act is very much focused on the activity of work, and we talked about that at the last governing body meeting. Particularly for Council, this is crucial because of the wide-ranging impact we have on public safety, and also we've got to make sure that it's focused accordingly at those who have the most influence and control during the performance of a task. So for example, at the last meeting we talked about contractors. Clearly a contractor must take care of their own people. They are a PCBU first and foremost, but if it's on a council job, we also want to ensure that we influence that job is done safely. But the primary duty of care is with the contractor, and that's something that we've really got to clarify and get better in our minds at. Currently, safety for many people is seen as an obstacle or a bureaucratic process, whereas the reality is that it's actually a very powerful business enhancement tool, like Lean or Six Sigma. Changing the culture is critical, and this is one of the critical things that we're trying to achieve with our strategy. It is to change and bring that culture. We want Council to recognise that a well-functioning health and safety system relies on participation, leadership and accountability at all levels of the organisation. What we want to do is we want to align safety to all Council operations and be an active planning consideration by all our people leaders, project managers and political leaders when making decisions to ensure that we build this culture of excellence and we lead from the top. In order for us to build the world-class city safely and efficiently. For me, this is really important because it's not just about protecting our most valuable resource, which are our people, but as we build the future of Auckland as Council, we're in a position to influence our partners, contractors, CCOs to also do it safely and demand from them the highest standards of safety also as we go about our business. Interestingly, when I was in the UK, Tower Bridge, which is obviously a historic icon, not many people know that 10 people lost their lives in building that bridge. I would not like the same thing or the same stain to be upon Auckland. You know, we built the world's most amazing city, but it cost 10 people's lives. I think that's something none of us want, so we must drive those standards higher. But it is also about balancing common sense and focusing in on risk, and critical risk is important to this. We need to understand both the focus on our strategy, and therefore, as a result of that, competency is one of the key features that we're rolling out to all our people leaders. And as such, we're currently rolling out the Managing Safely training programme to all of our people leaders, which has been inspired by the Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, IOSH. One of the highlights I'd like to focus you into in this report is the LTIFR, Lost Time Injury Frequency Rate measure. It is a lag measure, but it is extensively used, and Council set a target back in 2015 of achieving a rate of 225. The good news is we have seen our injury rate steadily decrease, and in November this year, just this month, we finally hit this target as Council. Not just hit it, but we've dipped beneath it, and we are now sitting at 1.98, which is a huge achievement for Council, and everybody that really took this to deliver it. This should certainly be celebrated, but again, it's just the start, and we must remain engaged in order to ensure that it permanently remains low and that this culture remains with us. One of the key features of this report for you as officers is that it also gives you an insight into some of the critical risks within the organisation. The data that you see here based is on reports from staff, because it's all reported in through the risk manager application that we have. And from this, we can see that violence is Council's #1 risk, and we can talk about that in a second if you wish. The report seeks to give you some assurance that a work programme is currently underway to tackle this key risk. And the report ends with a summary of the developments set against the 6 due diligence areas as set for you as officers under the Health and Safety at Work Act, which is the critical bit. I think the report stands very much on its own. It's quite straightforward, but I'm really happy to take questions from you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ollie. I'll move the recommendations in the report. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Sayers. And questions to Ollie regarding the report. It's pretty good news and a lot of it, but anything that Deputy Mayor Cashmore.
Thanks for the report, sir. Congratulations, Sue, by the way.
Thank you very much.
We'll get sleep eventually. 45% violence. So traditionally that's been animal management and libraries. Is it still the same? And how's the breakdown?
Very much still the same, yes. We are seeing very much the majority coming from the animal management front. As we're encouraging reporting, we're also seeing it from a few of the other sort of more public-facing areas. But yes, traditionally, and it's still the same.
And is that trend getting worse on either one of those fronts?
I think at the moment, it's looking like it's getting worse from the point of view that we're seeing more of it reported, which is actually a good thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether the issue is actually getting worse. It was probably already there, but we're seeing more of it reported, which is great for us to be able to intervene in it.
Have we levelled any prosecutions against perpetrators of these sorts of activities, crimes?
No, I don't believe we have.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Your Worship. Oliver, just on the recommendations, but the advisory boards that we have, are they part of our health and safety?
Can you clarify that?
Well, with the advisory boards that we have on board that advise the council, the members there, are there any obligations under the Health and Safety Act that we need to at least put them through as well, through the health and safety?
I think everybody needs to have an awareness of where their influence and control lies, and obviously any decisions that they are making that can arise to function, then yes, they need to be mindful of those if they're making decisions on behalf of council. But I can perhaps clarify that for you if I understand sort of a bit more in terms of how they operate.
Yeah, it's just with the advisory boards. I mean, and just get back to us, Oliver, because I just wanted to, if there is that they are aware of the health and safety, I mean, our officers work with them. And we have liaison councillors as well to our advisory panels. So it was just a matter of seeing where they fit under the Act, because they are advisory panels advising the council. So if you can get back to us with that, that'll be great. And also just around the recommendation, Your Worship, of having the advisory panels advised of this particular report as well, because they're not on there. So that's important. And then, Ollie, I've read the, Oliver, sorry, not Ollie,
Ollie's
Oliver.
fine.
I've read the Audit and Risk Committee's report on the 6th of the 12th. And number 35 on that particular report, and I just want clarification around was closed, and this is until financial year 2018, number 35. Can you just explain what that particular... where is it? It was on the...
Yeah, it's under duty 3. Is that the one?
I think it's,
35?
yeah.
So essentially, when the new legislation hit council, there was a plan put in place that identified that actually we needed to close some gaps with regards to that. A business case was taken up to the investment group to identify further costings that we needed to actually meet the criteria of the Act, and that business case was approved, and we currently have that in place for the next
Right,
for this year and the next 18-19.
Yep, so I saw that.
So after that, we go back to what was essentially the post sort of budget pre-legislation. So what we need to think about as an organisation is whether we need to actually make that sort of budget available on a more permanent basis. But we need to basically see, once it's all settled and calm, whether we can actually put a figure on that managing operating budget.
Okay, thanks, Oliver. So, Your Worship, just again, just on the recommendation we have in front of us, it was just for our advisory panels to be sent the report as well, because I know it was in the previous governing body meeting, but There's nothing up here.
Well, I'm happy either for them to go, for us to send the report directly to the advisory panels, or to do that through Kathy Casey as the liaison chair in charge of the panels, whichever's easiest to do.
I'm into whatever the easiest
Yep,
is, Your
yep,
Worship,
we'll-
so
we'll-
as
By
long
the way,
as...
it'd be useful for the advisory panels to have those.
Yep,
Thank
definitely.
you. Councillor Cooper.
No, I'm just following, I'm just not sure of the, I mean, I understand that the advisory boards are not PCBU, and so I'm just mindful of more work and more stuff loaded onto them where they have no decision-making. But anyway, that's up to Maxie's decisions.
Through you, Chair, the advisory panel members are not officers,
Yeah.
so they don't have the same obligations as a director,
Right.
but they are involved in our activities.
Okay, so that's good for the
Receiving
information.
the report would be
For their
quite helpful
information,
for them.
essentially.
That's
Right.
the, sorry, through you, Chair, that's the reason why I've asked, is the information for them in regards to, especially highlighted from the Deputy Mayor in regards to the injury, so that's the reason for it.
Oh.
Okay, that's fine.
So my,
Councillor
yeah,
Cooper.
just my questions, comments. One is really good to see the smoking cessation programs. That's really good. The other one for me was following on from the violence harm. Is there any correlation between when we'll up an activity, like we've been focusing for the last year or more on menacing dogs? And so I'm just wondering whether that, because of that kind of higher risk to staff, that would possibly be an expectation, and we're getting a lot more call-outs and awareness of that cohort of animals. When we're planning these activities, those are the sort of things that are taken into account, that you might see a spike in that sort of harm, or when they're doing the planning?
Through the chair, very much so. Essentially, the risk assessment process is geared around sort of identifying the potential sort of risks that you use. So obviously, if you're going to be introducing further measures or further further actions, then clearly you need to ensure that you've got the right and relevant controls in place. If we're going to be doing a more, say, I know we wouldn't, but a more aggressive campaign, for example, then we might expect, and we might be expected to aim off for extra control.
So in terms of that, do you think that would have been highlighted in the assessment, that we might have more? You know, I don't know, because I mean, I've just got some raw figures here. When we ask the question, why do we see more, often we say, oh, because of awareness, but we never know. So I guess that's what I'm asking is, in the kind of planning for that program, the whole sort of focus we've had on that, would it have been identified, and then would have you possibly expected to either see a spike, or hopefully not, because you've identified the risks in the first place? That's what I don't know if I'm explaining it or asking it in the right way, but
No, you are. You're making actual sense.
change? Oh, yay, got one today.
Through risk assessment, what you want to do is you want to foresee those sort of issues, and then either deploy controls through training or engineering or whatever they may be, to actually try and minimise the actual impact of it. And that could be all sorts of things, from working in pairs to diffuse that situation or whatever.
Yeah.
So yes, so actually, if there's more planning for it, we should see the correlation in these sort of go down. However, what we might see is a correlating spike going up in, for example, the verbal side of sides,
Yes.
as opposed to the actual assault manifestation of violence.
I guess what I'm kind of getting to here is, with that number, when you look at it, can you go, actually, yes, we've got a spike in that because we've been doing these activities? Or,
You could potentially, I haven't correlated those figures. but-
no, but I mean, I guess you get a whole lot of data to put that together. Okay, thank you. That's great work.
Thank you very much. Councillor Chris Darby.
No question, thank you.
Sorry. Councillor Desley Simpson.
Thank you, Your Worship. A question, is it compulsory for elected members to have health and safety training?
It's not compulsory. However, we'd like to think that it's something that is really quite important. As officers, under the legislation, you really need to be sort of aware of that. So we do have a training program which we constantly run at council, which we expect all of our sort of members and obviously our local board members as well to go through.
So, leading question, I asked you that because in the report it says that there is one local board that's declined health and safety training, and I wanted to know what was the reason for that decline and how could we potentially persuade them that they actually really should do it?
I do remember this one. I believe the rationale they gave was that there were quite a few solicitors sitting within that group, and they were pretty au fait with their health and safety responsibilities. So it's something that we are taking back and,
Okay,
and
so
checking with.
potentially the information in that could have given the reason as opposed to just saying they didn't want to do it. I just wouldn't like any other local board. This is going to local boards, right?
Yes, it is.
And so, oh, well, they're not doing it. We're not going to do it either.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think any local boards have said they're not going to do it because they don't want to do it. That's certainly not the case.
It's not how this reads.
Great. Councillor Hill? Or Councillor Watson first, and
Sorry.
Councillor Hill.
I've just got a couple of comments to make. Touch it if you want to
Comments
go.
rather than questions. Councillor Hills?
Thank you, and I know we talked the other day about mental health initiatives and wellbeing and stress, and there's a strategy coming, but will that include more access to, say, supervision, mental health support and issues around that? Or are we looking to bring that back to us as a...
Yes, we'll be looking to consider elements of that within the strategy. One of the things that we did do straight after the back of the last meeting where that came up, we're in a position to up our EAP sort of response from 3 sessions to 6 sessions. So things that we can do in terms of quick wins, absolutely. What we do need to do is to review sort of the access and the support mechanisms that we do have for our staff, which are probably a bit more proactive as opposed to being sort of ambulance at the bottom of the hill stuff. But that is something that we will be looking at the strategy. Things that we're currently sort of banding around at the moment is whether we have a mental health sort of program, and part of it would be around sort of training our managers in recognising symptoms and obviously how to apply management around sort of issues like that. We also want to think about doing some sort of awareness campaign that says, the whole sort of moniker, it's okay to not be okay, and really build up on that to really just destigmatise the mental health situation in the workplace.
I'd be incredibly supportive of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Right. We've run out of questions, so we'll now move to comments. I've got Councillor Watson.
Okay, yeah, thanks. I just wanted to make a couple of comments, and thank you, Oliver, for another very good report. In terms of Council's health and safety obligations, particularly as it goes to the due diligence duties of elected representatives, and it's very much in the context of mental health and well-being, which in the modern era is very much probably the most visible area where work has to be done by organisations, and often the bigger the organisation, the more work that has to be done. And I know that one of our duties is certainly to ensure appropriate resourcing and processes. One of the things that concerned me about the findings of the survey was the relatively low response rate from people across the organisation, and although there was clearly enough there to create a very clear message as to incidents of depression or people feeling stressed, but also to actually identifying what's causing that stress. And from my perspective, I felt some of the comments of some of the other councillors weren't really helpful. There was a willingness to dismiss that as being as a consequence of some unkind remarks or some criticisms in the paper or some media, and that somehow was an explanation of a high degree of depression or stress. That's not helpful, because in most organisations the causes of those sorts of behaviours are far more related to the work and to the managerial culture often within that organisation. So in terms of trying to identify what actually is driving that high depression or stress rate, and B, formulating more appropriate responses, then I think there's some work to be done to actually do that, to actually identify what's going on in the Auckland Council there, and how it might be approached. And I think in the first instance, it would be very helpful if, and I know you can't force people to do it, but if there's a much higher response rate from staff, and I assume that the ability to feel that they can be honest and open with no kind of comeback or recrimination is a very useful starting point. In fact, it's a necessity if you are going to get people to fill in. So I'm impressed with the work that you're doing, Oliver, but this is an area that, in terms of my due diligence duties, that I'm flagging publicly as a concern. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Any further comments? If not, I will put the resolution that we received the Health, Safety and Wellbeing Update Report, and thank Ollie and the team for producing a very informative and useful report. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no. Carried.